Today, we uncover the shocking truth about UK coffee. Because here's something that might surprise you. More than 9 out of 10 of us in Britain drink coffee. Black, white, instant, pod, latte, cappuccino, cheap supermarket jar, fancy artisan bag, we drink it by the gallon every single day. It wakes us up, it gets us through the afternoon slump. It's the reason most conversations happen at all before 10 in the morning. But here's the uncomfortable question nobody asks while they're staring into their mug. What exactly is in it? And I don't mean the obvious. I mean the fillers, the sugar, the additives, the palm oil, the stuff that isn't coffee at all, hiding inside something you bought because it had the word coffee written on the front. Because when you actually turn that jar, that sachet, that plastic pod around and read the small print, some of the most familiar brands in Britain are selling you something that bears almost no resemblance to a simple cup of roasted coffee beans and hot water. And here's what we found, and some of it genuinely made me put my mug down. There's a famous instant brand, one of the biggest in the world, whose own label admits sugar is the single biggest ingredient by weight. Not coffee, sugar. There's a trendy, posh-looking jar you see on everyone's kitchen counter, the one that costs a small fortune, that contains the same industrial preservatives and processing chemicals as the cheap own-brand jar sitting right beneath it on the shelf. There's a whole aisle of latte and cappuccino sachets filled with such a tiny amount of actual coffee that you'd be better off licking the lid of a real jar. There's a pod system that promised you barista-quality coffee at home, now generating enough waste every single year to wrap around the planet. And the company behind it is fighting every attempt to make those pods recyclable. There's an entire ethical fair trade brand whose parent company has been linked to deforestation in some of the most fragile ecosystems on Earth, while the label on the front still makes you feel virtuous for buying it. There's a luxury gold blend that's carrying additives the cheaper version doesn't even bother with. There's a vegan turmeric latte sachet aimed at wellness-conscious shoppers that's built on a base of sugar, palm oil, and modified starch. And there's a budget instant coffee sold by every major supermarket that's been found to carry the highest levels of a chemical the UK government has set official benchmark limits for, because of its links to cancer. And there's a bottle of syrup that's quietly redefined what we think of as a cappuccino, and it isn't coffee at all. And before we even touch the first jar, there's something we need to get straight, because this is where almost everybody gets tricked. Coffee, real coffee, has exactly one ingredient: coffee beans. That's it. You roast them, you grind them, you add hot water. The end. Everything else that calls itself coffee is a processed food product. And the distance between those two things determines whether you're getting a proper brew or an engineered warm drink that happens to have been in the same room as a coffee bean at some point during its manufacture. And the coffee aisle in a modern UK supermarket has become a masterclass in exploiting that gap. The front of the jar sells you heritage, richness, smoothness, gold, indulgence, ethical sourcing, barista quality. The back of the jar, the bit written by law, tells you the real story. Because once you understand that instant coffee, despite being the most convenient option in the world, is one of the most heavily processed food products on any shelf, and that the cheaper and faster it gets, the more processing and the more additives it takes to keep it stable, the whole aisle suddenly looks very different. And for the specialty sachets, the lattes, the cappuccinos, the 3-in-1 sticks, the picture is genuinely shocking. Some of these products contain less actual coffee than a single spoonful of the real stuff. So, we've gone through the major coffee brands, sachets, pods, and jars currently sitting on UK supermarket shelves, and we're going to expose the 9 coffees you really need to be careful with. Then I'll tell you the handful that are actually still worth drinking. But, before we start, do me one favor. If you believe ordinary people deserve honest answers about what's actually in the jar they reach for every morning, then hit that hype button for me right now, and give this video a like while you're at it. I know it sounds small, but it genuinely isn't. Every single hype pushes this video in front of thousands more ordinary families who've been completely in the dark about what they're pouring into their mugs. And the louder this gets, the harder it becomes for these companies to keep selling you a story on the front while the truth lives in the fine print on the back. This is how we push back. This is how standards actually get raised. So hype it, like it, and let's make some proper noise together. And once you've done that, leave me a comment, because I honestly want to know what's sitting in your kitchen cupboard right now. And if you're new here, subscribe, because I keep making videos exactly like this one, pulling apart the everyday products you've been told your whole life to trust. And let's get into it. Number 9. The entire 3-in-1 sachet category. Now, I'm going to name names in a moment, but we need to start with the concept itself, because the 3-in-1 sachet, a product sold by every major brand on the planet, Nescafé, Kenco, Douwe Egberts, Asda's Own, Sainsbury's Own, is arguably the most misleading coffee product on any UK shelf. Let's look at the ingredients of a standard Nescafé Original 3-in-1 sachet. Sugar is the first ingredient, listed before coffee, before anything else. That means there is more sugar in these sachets by weight than there is actual coffee. Kenco's 3-in-1 version is 53% sugar. Asda's own brand NY Coffee is 55% sugar. One single sachet, a 16-gram little envelope of warm milk drink, contains over 8 grams of sugar. That's nearly 2 teaspoons. For context, the NHS says your entire daily intake of added sugar should not exceed 30 grams. One of these tiny coffee sachets at 11's uses up more than a quarter of that limit. And then there's what's in the rest. Glucose syrup, fully hydrogenated coconut oil, stabilizers E340 and E452, emulsifier E471, anti-caking agent E551, milk protein, modified starch. And the actual instant coffee content in most of these? Somewhere between 9 and 13%. Read that back. Less than a tenth of the sachet is coffee. The other 90% is sugar, milk powder, palm-derived fat, and industrial food additives. What you have bought is not a coffee. It is a hot, sweet milk powder with a hint of the cheapest instant money can buy, dressed up in the packaging of a coffee break. One commenter said it better than I ever could. I thought I was buying coffee. Turns out I was buying dessert with a caffeine afterthought. And the saddest part is, these sachets sell in the millions because people grab them at the till thinking they're a little coffee treat, never once checking what's actually inside. Number 8. Starbucks Via Instant Coffee. Now, we need to be fair here. Starbucks Via, the plain black variety, is actually just coffee. Instant and micro-ground Arabica beans, no added ingredients. That bit is fine. But the flavored Via sachets, the caramel, the vanilla, the latte, they tell a very different story. Take the Starbucks Via Caramel Latte sachet sold in UK supermarkets. The first ingredient is skimmed milk powder. The second is sugar. The actual coffee content, instant coffee combined with a tiny fraction of roast and ground, is approximately 5.8%. Let me say that again. A product branded Starbucks, carrying the name of one of the most famous coffee companies in the world, contains less than 6% coffee. The rest is milk solids, sugar, natural flavors, stabilizers. And here's the kicker. These sachets are manufactured under license by Nestlé. So the same company that brings you Nescafé is also making the coffee product you're buying because you wanted the premium Starbucks experience. The brand on the front and the factory on the back are two completely different things. And the price? A pack of 8 Starbucks Via Latte sachets costs around £5. For a product that is mostly skimmed milk powder and sugar, that works out at roughly 62 pence a cup for a hot sugary drink with barely any coffee in it. When you can buy a jar of perfectly decent, pure instant coffee for around £4 that makes 50 to 60 cups, the numbers do not lie. You're paying a colossal premium for the name and the packaging, not for the coffee. Number 7. Costa Latte and Cappuccino sachets. And this follows the exact same pattern because they're made by the same recipe writer. Costa's salted caramel latte sachets, also sold in every major supermarket, contain around 7% coffee. Again, the majority is skimmed milk powder, sugar, glucose syrup, coconut oil, stabilizers. One sachet contains around 8 grams of sugar. So here's the uncomfortable truth. You can walk into a Costa coffee shop and buy a flat white that is, for all its faults, at least a shot of real espresso with steamed milk. But the Costa-branded sachet you grab at the supermarket, which carries the same logo, the same colors, the same promise of barista taste, is a completely different product. It is a hot milk drink mix with a whisper of coffee. And they know exactly what they're doing. They know the Costa name carries a certain weight, a certain trust, a certain association with quality coffee. And they've licensed that name to a product that barely qualifies as coffee at all. This isn't a criticism of the Costa brand's in-store coffee. It's a criticism of the gap between what the logo promises on the box and what the ingredients list delivers in the cup. The front says Costa, the back says 7% coffee. Number 6. Douwe Egberts Cappuccino Sachets. Douwe Egberts is one of the oldest and most respected coffee brands in Europe, and their pure gold instant jar is genuinely decent stuff, 100% coffee, no additives. But their cappuccino sachets are a textbook case of the same marketing trick. The ingredients list begins with glucose syrup, skimmed milk powder, fully hydrogenated coconut oil, maltodextrin, and then, eventually, instant coffee at around 9.4%. Stabilizers, modified starch, anti-caking agent, all follow. So here's the lesson for the whole category, and I want you to really lock this in. If you buy a jar of Douwe Egberts Pure Gold, you are buying coffee. If you buy a box of Douwe Egberts Cappuccino Sachets, you are buying a hot milk drink mix that the company has chosen to call cappuccino because it sells better than what it really is. And the gap between those two products is the difference between being a coffee drinker and being a customer of a processed food product dressed in coffee's clothing. Number 5. Kenco 3-in-1 and Latte Sachets. We've already mentioned the sugar content, 53% sugar in the 3-in-1 version, but Kenco deserves its own entry because of something else. Kenco is one of the brands that also sells a perfectly good pure instant coffee. Kenco Smooth, Kenco Millicano Original, just coffee, zero additives. And yet the same company, Jacobs Douwe Egberts, chooses to put these heavily processed sachets on the shelf right beside them. The Kenco 2-in-1 sachets, the ones without added sugar, they just replace the sugar with glucose syrup, so it's still a heavily processed product with only about 10% coffee. The Kenco Latte Sachet contains 11.2% skimmed milk powder, then glucose syrup, sugar, and then instant coffee at 7.6%. So you are paying Kenco prices, you are buying Kenco's reputation for a product that is less than 8% coffee. This is what the industry calls brand extension, and what we should call it is brand exploitation. They built a reputation for decent coffee over decades, and now they're using that reputation to sell you what is, in every meaningful way, a different product entirely. Number 4. Nescafé Azera and the acrylamide question. Now, Nescafé Azera is widely considered one of the better instant coffees. It contains soluble coffee plus a proportion of micro-ground roast and ground beans, which gives it a fuller flavor. The ingredients list, Americano variety, is just soluble coffee and 5% roast and ground coffee. Fine on the face of it, but there's a wider issue with all instant coffee, and particularly with certain mainstream brands, and it's worth talking about honestly rather than scaremongering. When coffee beans are roasted at high temperatures, a chemical called acrylamide forms naturally. It's a process contaminant, the same thing that forms when you toast bread or bake potatoes. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies acrylamide as probably carcinogenic to humans. The UK Food Standards Agency has set a benchmark level for acrylamide in instant coffee of 850 micrograms per kilogram, and multiple studies have found that instant coffee contains roughly twice the acrylamide levels of fresh brewed coffee, because the soluble extraction process concentrates it. Now, does this mean you should panic and throw away your jar? No. The levels involved are low, and the scientific consensus is that moderate coffee consumption does not pose a significant cancer risk. But what it does mean is that you should know what you're drinking, and that the cheapest instant coffees, the budget own-brand jars sold for under £2 consistently test at the higher end of the acrylamide spectrum. A survey of UK supermarket instant coffees found that the budget lines, including Tesco's own value range, carried among the highest levels. One of Nestlé's own studies confirmed their products fall within safe limits, but the point stands: if you can choose a coffee that has undergone less processing, you are reducing your exposure to a chemical the government has felt the need to set official reduction benchmarks for. And the cheaper the instant coffee, the more likely it is that corners have been cut in the roasting and processing that drive those levels up. Number 3. Nescafé Gold Blend. This one is going to be unpopular, because Nescafé Gold Blend is Britain's best-selling instant coffee. It's the jar that sat in more kitchen cupboards than any other for decades, and on the surface it looks fine. The ingredients list says soluble coffee, that's it. But here's the problem. Gold Blend has been steadily declining in what you actually get for your money, while the marketing has been steadily increasing. Which tested 12 Gold Roast instant coffees, and Gold Blend scored just 69%. It was beaten by M&S Gold at 70% and Waitrose Gold Roast at 70%, both of which were awarded Best Buy status. And the difference in price? Nescafé Gold Blend costs around £6 for a 200-gram jar. M&S Gold, which beat it in the blind tasting and carries the Fair Trade logo, costs about £7.25 for the same size. Waitrose Gold Roast costs around £3.70 for 100 grams, so comparable. But here's the real issue. Gold Blend is owned by Nestlé, and Nestlé has a record in coffee that deserves scrutiny. The company has faced repeated criticism from environmental groups, including Greenpeace, regarding its palm oil supply chain and deforestation. Nestlé's coffee supply chain has also been implicated in deforestation concerns. A 2010 Greenpeace campaign targeting Nestlé's Kit Kat over palm oil, sourced from suppliers linked to illegal deforestation in Indonesia, became one of the most famous consumer campaigns of the decade. And while Nestlé has made commitments since then, targeting deforestation-free supply chains by 2025, as of 2024, they were at 96% assessed deforestation-free for palm oil. That's not 100%. And none of that touches the coffee itself. The point is, when you buy Nescafé Gold Blend, the money goes to a conglomerate whose supply chain ethics have been the subject of global campaigns. You are not supporting a coffee company. You are supporting one of the largest food and beverage corporations in the world, and they know that the Gold Blend name still carries the trust they earned 30 years ago. Reputation is a memory. The supply chain is the current account. Number 2. The coffee pod systems. Nestlé's Dolce Gusto, Nescafé's own brand pods, and the various supermarket-compatible pods. Now, to be fair to the category, there are now compostable pod options and recycling schemes, but the core issue is this. Coffee pods produce an estimated 60,000 tons of waste annually in the UK alone, and most of them are not recyclable through standard household collections. The pods are made from a combination of plastic and aluminium, fused together in a way that most recycling facilities simply cannot separate. Nestlé's own Nespresso system was taken to task by Which, in 2023, for making environmental claims that were described as misleading because only a small fraction of used pods were actually being recycled through their own scheme. The vast majority were going to landfill or incineration. And while the coffee inside a Nespresso pod is generally decent, because Nespresso does use quality espresso blends, you are paying, on average, 30 to 40 pence per pod for around 5 grams of coffee. That works out at roughly £60 to £80 per kilo. You can buy a bag of high-quality specialty coffee beans for £20 to £30 per kilo, so you are paying 2 to 3 times the price for coffee that has been pre-ground, sealed in a non-recyclable container, and marketed to you as a premium experience. And the environmental cost is not just an unfortunate side effect, it's a design choice. Several independent studies and campaigns have pointed out that pod manufacturers could have designed fully recyclable or fully compostable pods from the beginning. They chose not to. They chose profit margins and patent protection over your recycling bin. That's not convenience. That's a business model built on waste. Number 1. And this is the most important thing in the entire video: the flavored latte and cappuccino syrups, the Monin, the Tate & Lyle, the Starbucks branded bottles. And I know what you're thinking: hold on, that's not coffee. And you're right. But stay with me, because this is the entry that ties the whole video together. The entire coffee shop industry, and by extension the supermarket coffee aisle, has quietly redefined what a coffee drink means. A standard caramel latte from any high street chain contains espresso, steamed milk, and roughly 2 to 4 pumps of flavored syrup. That syrup is sugar, water, natural flavorings, preservatives, and colorings, often E150D, which is known as ammonia caramel, a colorant classified as a possible human carcinogen by the IARC at high levels. And here's the point: when you buy a bottle of Monin syrup to make your own lattes at home, you are adding the very thing that has transformed a simple coffee into a dessert. The average flavored latte from a coffee shop contains between 20 and 30 grams of sugar. That's 5 to 7 teaspoons. That's your entire daily recommended added sugar intake gone before you've got to your desk. And the supermarket versions of these drinks are no different. The Starbucks Frappuccino bottles sold in the chilled aisle, the Costa ready-to-drink lattes, they all hover between 15 and 25 grams of sugar per bottle. These are not coffee drinks, they are sugar drinks with caffeine. And the genius of it, the real marketing masterstroke, is that the word coffee on the front makes you feel like you're making the healthier choice compared to a can of Coke. And if you compare them straight, sure, a coffee shop latte has marginally less sugar than a full sugar cola. But that's an incredibly low bar to clear. The truth is, the coffee aisle has been colonized by the sugar industry. The syrups, the flavored sachets, the ready-to-drink bottles, the 3-in-1 sticks, they are all delivery systems for sugar, with enough coffee added to make you feel like you're getting a grown-up drink. One commenter said, "I switched from sweetened lattes to black coffee and lost 7 pounds in a month without changing anything else." And that's the whole thing in a single line. The coffee you think you're drinking for the taste, and the ritual is largely a vehicle for sugar you didn't even know was there. The real lesson of this video is not about any one brand. It's about the way an entire industry has taken the simple, honest act of drinking coffee, a boiled bean in hot water, one of the most ancient beverages on earth, and transformed it into a processed, sweetened, additive-laden packaged food category worth billions. And the product itself, the actual coffee, has become almost incidental to the experience being sold. Which brings us, at long last, to what you should actually be reaching for instead. So, how do you find the good stuff? It's remarkably simple. Ignore every single word on the front of the jar and read the ingredients. If it says only coffee, you're safe. If it lists anything else, sugar, milk powder, oils, stabilizers, flavorings, it is not a coffee, it is a coffee product, and you should treat it accordingly. The pure instant coffee rule is this: one ingredient. That's the test. First, Waitrose Gold Roast, which, Best Buy, scored 70% in their blind taste test, beating Nescafé, Kenko, and Douwe Egberts, £3.70 for 100 grams. Just coffee, no additives. The one catch, and I'll always tell you the catch, is availability. You need to be near a Waitrose or order online. But for the price, it's streets ahead of the big brands. Second, M&S Gold Instant Coffee, also a witch. Best Buy also scored 70%. Fair trade certified, so you know the beans were ethically sourced. £7.25 for 200 grams. A little pricier, but you're paying for the fair trade mark and the quality. The one catch is the same as Waitrose. Not every supermarket carries M&S food halls. Third, Lidl Bellarome Barista Instant Coffee. Lidl's own brand Instant has quietly become one of the best value options on any shelf. It's pure freeze-dried coffee, no additives, and Good Housekeeping recommended it as a top pick in 2024. Around £2.50 for 100 grams, that's proper coffee at budget prices. The one catch, and it's a small one, is that it's Robusta heavy, so it's a bit stronger and more bitter than Arabica blends. But if you like your coffee with a kick, this is your jar. Fourth, Kenko Smooth. Pure instant coffee, Zero additives, and it's one of the better tasting middle ground options. Usually around £4 to £5 for 200 grams. The one catch is that Kenko also sells those 3-in-1 sachets, so you need to make sure you're buying the jar, not the box of processed sticks. But the jar itself is solid. Fifth, make your own. Because coffee isn't complicated. Buy whole beans from a local roaster or a decent supermarket brand, a bag of Taylors of Harrogate or Union Direct Trade, or even Percol. Get a simple grinder, a cafetiere or a V60, and make your coffee fresh. It takes about 4 minutes, and it costs, per cup, somewhere between 10 and 20 pence, depending on the beans. That's less than half the cost of an espresso pod, and vastly cheaper than the Costa sachet habit. The flavor difference between freshly ground coffee and instant is night and day. And you know exactly what's in it. Coffee. That's it. So, here's the whole thing in a single breath. The coffee aisle has been taken over by sugar, milk powder, stabilizers, and marketing. The 3-in-1 sachets and the cappuccino mixes contain more sugar than coffee. The pods cost you a fortune, and the planet even more. And the flavored syrups have turned a simple morning brew into a dessert. But the good stuff, the real stuff, is still there. You just have to know where to look. You have to ignore the front of the jar and read the back. You have to choose products that contain exactly one ingredient, coffee. And you have to be brave enough to switch from a caramel latte to a proper black coffee with a splash of milk. And see how your body feels after a week of not drinking 20 grams of sugar before lunch. None of this means you have to bin every sachet in your desk drawer tomorrow morning. It just means you get to choose with your eyes wide open, instead of letting the jar quietly choose for you. You don't need the sugar theatre. You don't need to pay £5 for a box of milk powder with a whisper of Starbucks. And that trendy bottle of syrup is not a coffee essential, it's a sugar delivery system with a pump. If this video opened your eyes even a little, hit that hype button one more time and smash that like. Because that's the easiest way to get this in front of the millions of people who still think their morning latte is a coffee. Share it with someone who buys 3-in-1 sachets by the box. And leave me a comment telling me which everyday product you want me to pull apart next, because you lot always come up with good ones. Until next time, read your labels, drink real coffee, and safe for meals,